Culture, in particular the culture of a school, is a really interesting phenomenon, I think, anyway. And I think what makes it interesting is that there's a gap between what we know about its importance versus the practicality of actually working on it. What I mean by that is that, for instance, when I speak at a principals conference, I'll often have a little fun in that I'll ask everyone in the room to put their hand up if they think the culture of their school is important. And of course, nearly everybody puts their hand up. But when I let them know that I'm going to ask one of the people with their hands up in a moment to come out the front and to tell everyone what the correct definition of culture is, the confidence to have our hand up goes away and a lot of hands go down. And it places us at a really kind of important or an uncomfortable fork in the road. Because if we have a room full of people who have been put in charge of our schools say that the culture of our school, of their school, is incredibly important, but they're not quite sure what it is, how do they work on it? How do they get busy on that culture? Or are they in some ways just victims of their culture? Are they in some ways just victims of what are the behaviours? What are the things that people do when they show up at their school? And as cultural leaders, we make a really important decision. And that decision is that we're actually going to determine what that culture is and not be victims of just what people happen to do when they show up in our culture. And that's a really important decision. So in defining culture, we sometimes get a bit stuck because I even read a white paper once that said that there were 88 factors that influence school culture. So if you as teachers and school leaders can just remember all of those, you'll be absolutely fine, apparently. I don't think it's about memorising a list of factors that influence culture. I think it's about getting really clear with a simple, practical, useful definition of what school culture is. And at Real Schools, what we do is adopt a definition that says that school culture is nothing more than, using some terms that we as educators are familiar with, a collective noun. And it's a collective noun for behaviours. And what we think is that the three key stakeholder groups in your school, the staff, the students, and the parent community, are contributing a bunch of behaviours that eventually collectively become your culture. The thing is that they contribute two kinds of behaviours, one positive and one negative. They contribute behaviours that we encourage. The kinds of behaviours that we might say, that's fantastic, we love you doing that. We might even look up on the wall and say, you know what, that behaviour fits under that value that we have in our school of respect or responsibility or honesty, and we'd love you to do more of that behaviour. We'd love you to do it more regularly and more often, more creatively. And we foster and encourage those encourageable behaviours. But whether we like it or not, because by virtue of the fact that our culture itself, our community itself is a very human one, we invite often hundreds of young people and people like their parents who have emotional, irrational connections to them into our schools every single day. They all contribute behaviours that on occasions we have to tolerate, that we'd rather they didn't bring to our culture, but they do. And being a really clever leader of culture and a really clever contributor to the culture in your school is not about getting hung up on those behaviours. You see, every relationship, every community, every culture has behaviours that aren't currently tolerated, even the best relationships. In fact, I don't know about you, but I don't even want to be in a relationship where there's no negativity, where there's no stuff that goes wrong. That actually kind of sounds a bit boring to me. Schools that play the culture game right aren't the ones that say we're trying to eliminate these tolerated behaviours. What they are is the schools who say we're going to get really clear. We're going to adopt together, collectively, a simple and explicit practice framework for how, when these thoroughly expected, tolerated behaviours show up, we approach them. And can we choose a methodology for doing that that allows us to address any tolerated behaviour in our school and as quickly, as efficiently, as effectively as possible, make it an encourageable one? And if you can get really clear at that methodology together, then you can achieve something that is often espoused by teachers and school leaders as being incredibly important for a really great culture, and that is consistency. You can achieve consistency of the way you approach those behaviours. You can achieve consistency of your processes without the need, without the fear that you need to be consistent about outcomes. So that's when we start to get ourselves into trouble, and that's when we get ourselves into disagreement and an inability to kind of be on the same page. So my conversation that I'd love you to be able to have today is a little around your school and how close you think you are to that agreed and shared definition of school culture. Do you think you're on the same page about culture being a collective noun for behaviours, encouraged ones, but also tolerated ones? And is your school okay with the fact that there are always going to be some tolerated behaviours? And can you also get really clear about the fact that working on culture is not about implementing another program? Culture's not the crop. Culture's the soil. And the success and the ability for your programs and for your people to thrive is all about the really clear focus that you as a staff can have on creating soil where people and programs have the greatest opportunity possible to thrive. That indeed is what your partnership with Real Schools is all about. A couple of conversations at your table this afternoon about how it is that your school is focused on culture and clear about culture might just be the first and really important step that you need to take to get to work.